Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi, and welcome to the ISO Show. Thanks very much for joining me today. You may recall a few episodes ago, I actually recorded a series of podcasts with David Algar, our carbonologist, on the standards relating to carbon neutrality. So that was ISO 14064 on carbon footprint verification, and also PAS 2060, the carbon neutrality standard. Now, we've been extremely busy with these standards and implementing carbonology over the last few months. And one of the questions that keeps cropping up is about managing carbon neutrality throughout your supply chain. Now, I thought it would be a good idea to just share with you a standard that it seems to be growing in demand, certainly this year, which is ISO 2400. So that's a guidance document on sustainable procurement. So that was published in 2017. And as I said, it is a guidance document. So it's not a certifiable document. You can't get certified against this standard. However, it is a really useful document if you are looking at your procurement, looking at your supply chain and looking at how sustainable it is, because it provides everything that you need to know on how to manage your supply chain sustainably. So what I'm going to do today is just unpack the standard. I'm just going to break it down into the different clauses and also to highlight, some of the drivers for sustainable procurement, and also looking at the principles of sustainable procurement, which is a key part of this standard. So the standard actually has been around for some time, but it was a British standard. It was BS 8903, which came out back in 2010. So it's a standard that we've been familiar with for a number of years, and we've actually aligned this with some of our clients' environmental management systems. So this is something that you might want to consider doing. As I said, it's not a certifiable standard, but it could really be beneficial for your organisation, not only from an operational point of view, but also in terms of having a competitive advantage if you are aligning your systems with this particular standard. So let's just take a look at the standard then. Now, as we know, every single organisation on the planet has an environmental, social and economic impact, regardless of the size of the organisation. So this particular guidance document is applicable to any size of organisation across any type of industry, because we all know that those impacts have an influence through the supply chain, and it does dictate whether we have a positive or a negative impact, and that's both commercially, from a business sense, and a lot of people are saying at the moment, if you cut your carbon, you're cutting your costs. But obviously, the main benefit here is, looking at how we influence that impact on our planet. Because procurement is a really powerful vehicle for organisations wishing to behave in a responsible way and to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. So many of our clients now are looking to achieve alignment with and looking at demonstrating compliance with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to be able to do that through your supply chain. Because by integrating sustainability in procurement, policies and practices, it just helps you to be able to manage your opportunities and risks, and just to focus in on those sustainable environmental, social and economic development issues. So ultimately, sustainable procurement represents a real opportunity to provide more value to your business by improving productivity, assessing value and performance throughout your supply chain, enabling communication between purchasers, suppliers and all of the key stakeholders. And also it helps to encourage innovation as well, which I'll come on to talk about later on when we look at some of the drivers. Now, before we dive into some of the key clauses within the standard, let's just take a look at what the definition for procurement is within the standard. Okay, because as we know, at the beginning of a standard, we always begin with terms and definitions. So procurement, in the eyes of the standard, is described as an activity of acquiring goods or services from suppliers. So this ultimately is the procurement process which considers the whole cycle from identification of needs right through to the end of services. So that's the end of a service contract or the end of life of goods, including disposal. So how does that compare with sustainable procurement? So again, taking the definition from the standard, sustainable procurement is described as procurement that has the most positive environmental, social and economic impacts possible over the entire life cycle. Okay, so we're looking at the sustainability aspects related to the goods and services and to the suppliers along the supply chain. Okay, so it's much broader, clearly, than just straightforward purchasing of goods and services. So before we dive into the standard itself, let's just take a look at some of those drivers for sustainable procurement. Because drivers are actually featured within the standard in one of the first clauses that you'll be looking at. So one of the things I'd like you to consider as you're listening to this is, what do you think are the main drivers for your organisation? Because the standard actually lists a number of them and you need to look at how they are actually going to be aligned with your sustainability objectives and goals for your supply chain. So let's just take a look at some of those, and what I'm going to do is just ask you those questions. I know obviously this is a podcast and you can't reply to me, but wherever you are, if you're driving in your car or at your desk or walking your dog, I'd just like you to kind of have like a bit of a mental check against some of these drivers and you see whether they actually resonate with you and your organisation. So one of the number one drivers in sustainable procurement is the customer. Okay, so you may be getting asked at the moment, what are you doing in relation to sustainable management? So this is all about responding to customer and consumer sustainability expectations. As we know, expectations have risen, and these will cover not just environmental aspects, but also health and safety, and also many other aspects, such as ethical management within your organisation. Another driver could be competitive advantage. So it is a competitive market in all industries. So would this give you the ability to offer goods or services by offering a sustainable value proposition, which is supported by your supply chain, which can be a key differentiator? Is it through innovation? This is something that I mentioned earlier on. So many organisations are using sustainable procurement to stimulate innovation throughout their supply chain in order to gain a greater shared value and also potentially to generate new markets. Or what about stakeholder expectations? You may have a parent company, or there may be another type of organisation that you're linked with, and you need to respond to their increasing demands to take account of environmental and social factors. That could be working conditions. It could be a number of things. It could be to respond to legislative and also regulations for your industry. Okay, because there are certain rules now around supply chains. So there was something that was published quite recently in the UK, which is a government procurement notice that if an organisation would like to bid for a tender over the value of £5 million, they need to have a carbon reduction management plan. And that's coming into force from the end of September 2021. So yes, you might be able to have a carbon reduction management plan for your organisation, but if you are heavily dependent on your supply chain, then you need to demonstrate how you're reducing your environmental footprint throughout your supply chain as well. Is one of your drivers risk management? So sustainability issues can influence brand value and your reputation, and it can also have an impact on your market share. I mean, let's look at, for example, diesel cars or the meat industry. So there are lots of different aspects that you need to consider because the buyers of today have got sustainability in mind when they're considering which products or services they're purchasing. So what kind of risks could you be exposed to that could link to price volatility or access to supply, access to financial funding? So investments are another key thing as well. So is an organisation likely to invest in your organisation as you're operating at the moment, or would you have an advantage if you introduce sustainability throughout your supply chain? Another aspect is employees. So as we know, sustainable procurement isn't just about environmental management, it's about looking after the welfare of your employees, okay, and creating a good work environment as well that's safe and secure for them. Is it financial reasons that you're looking at implementing sustainable procurement within your organisation? So a lot of organisations are using this opportunity to optimise costs. So if you're optimising your use of resources, it can reduce your costs significantly, as well as obviously reducing environmental impacts, economies of scale, and also a return on investment. And from that, you can create economic value as well. So that's about looking at the life cycle costs and also the benefit that can be brought as a result of your organisation being more efficient. Or it may be that you're just looking at being a leader in your field and also internally within your organisation. So is it just the fact that you are very passionate about sustainability and you want to promote sustainable practices, including sustainable procurement? So if you've already got other environmental standards like ISO 50001, the Energy Management Standard, or ISO 14001, this could be a quite natural, logical next step for you to be able to embrace a standard like ISO 2400 and to develop your procurement processes into sustainable procurement policies and procedures. And I think that the final thing that I'd like to add is organisational ethics as well. So this can really help to enhance the ethical behaviour of your organisation and then having an impact on your organisation's culture and values. Is it time to revisit your organisation's values? That's a question you need to ask yourself and your colleagues after you've listened to this podcast, hopefully. Okay, so there are a number of different drivers there. And I think at the end of the day, you will be tuning into, what's in it for you, what's in it for your organisation. But yeah, people are doing this for a number of different reasons. And there isn't any right or wrong way. Each organisation is unique. But I just wanted to share that with you because that will influence your sustainability objectives and goals and helping you to align this standard within your organisation. So I'd just like to touch on the key clauses within the standard, and then I'm just going to end with the principles of sustainable procurement as well. So as with any other ISO standard that we've covered on the ISO show, clauses 1, 2 and 3 aren't the sections that you actually can effectively implement. They cover things like the scope, normative references and terms and definitions. So all very useful information, but it's not necessarily information that you apply directly in relation to the clauses of the standard. So we're just going to go through clauses 4 to 7. So you've only actually got 4 clauses there that are implementable. So the first one is understanding the fundamentals. So this helps to provide you with an overview of sustainable procurement. It covers the scope and the principles of sustainable procurement. And it's the principles that I'm going to be going through shortly with you. But it also examines the why. Again, that's looking at the drivers that we've just been through. What is your why? Okay, it makes you question that because that can be really key in driving your sustainable procurement policies and procedures. Clause 5 is all about integration. Now this provides guidance on how sustainability considerations are integrated at a strategic level within the procurement practices of your business. So this helps to ensure that the intention is there, you've got the direction from the leadership team, and you've got your key sustainability priorities right at the forefront. So it's intended to assist top management in defining a sustainable procurement policy and strategy. Now, what I'd recommend here is that you actually get your leadership team involved in understanding what sustainable procurement is. Now, what we'll have shortly is a training course on 2400 over in the ISology Hub. So the ISology Hub is a membership platform, and it's got a wealth of information on sustainability, but also many other standards as well. So there'll be an e-learning course in there that you can get access to, and also an ISO 2400 checklist. So if you want to find out more information on that, you just need to head over to www.isologyhub.com. Okay, so that's all about the top level and getting leadership commitment and integration into your current working practices. Clause 6 describes the management techniques needed to successfully implement and to continually improve sustainable procurement. Now, this will help the individuals with responsibility for the procurement of goods or services. And it basically helps to effectively integrate the sustainability considerations that were just previously covered at the top level into the procurement process. So this really covers a number of different areas, such as enabling people, identifying and engaging stakeholders, measuring and improving performance, establishing a grievance mechanism, amongst other things. So that is clause 6. So that's all about the procurement management. So finally, clause 7 is looking at the considerations for the integration into existing procurement processes. So the key deliverable here is a sourcing strategy that includes sustainability. So this is aimed at the actual individuals that are responsible for procurement itself. Okay, so this is where you build on the existing process. You look at the planning, so what's involved with your RFQs, RFPs, when you're managing your procurement process, integrating sustainability requirements into those specifications, looking at how you select your suppliers, how you manage the contract, and also how you can include reviewing and learning from the contract. So that's basically managing the entire supplier life cycle. So that in essence are the key requirements within ISO 2400. So at the end of the standard, you've got the appendices. So Annex A covers sustainable procurement issues. So this is really useful. It provides a checklist of all the different types of issues that you might want to take into consideration, which are linked to the core subjects within the standard. Core subjects are things like human rights, which covers things like avoidance of complicity, civil and political rights, discrimination and vulnerable groups. So yes, and then it goes on to labour practices. So it looks at employment and employment relationships and conditions of work and social protection. So that's a really useful document at the end of the standard. So that's Annex A. And this is based on the principles of ISO 26000. 26000 is all about social responsibility. So that's another standard. But as you would expect, there is obviously a link there in terms of social responsibility and sustainable procurement. So I'd just like to end the podcast with running through the key principles of sustainable procurement, because these are at the heart of this particular standard. This covers all the key areas that you need to take into consideration for your sustainable procurement strategy and policies and procedures. So this includes accountability. So making sure that your organisation does step up and is fully accountable for its own impacts on society, the economy and the environment. Okay, and that's in context with the life cycle perspective of goods and services that you're purchasing. Transparency. So your organisation needs to be completely transparent on those decisions and activities that impact the environment, society and the economy. Ethical behaviour, full and fair opportunities, respect for stakeholder interests, respect for the rule of law and international norms of behaviour. So this actually ties in with, if you've already got other standards, the clause 4, context of the organisation, where you're looking at external issues, and that includes ethical, social, political, and also the legal aspects. Respect for human rights. Innovative solutions. So it's really interesting to see this as one of the core principles of ISO 2400. So this is all about an organisation being able to seek solutions to address sustainability objectives and encourage innovative procurement practices to promote more sustainable outcomes throughout the entire supply chain. Another core principle is focusing on needs. So these are your needs as an organisation, plus all your key stakeholders' needs. Integration. So obviously we've covered that, as we mentioned that in the standard. It's about integrating sustainability into your existing procurement practices to maximise sustainable outcomes. And the last couple are the analysis of costs, okay, because every business obviously needs to make money. And even if it's a non-profit organisation, you need to be able to manage your resources effectively so that you are able to survive in the next 5 to 10 years. You need to be able to manage those costs, regardless if you're a profit or non-profit organisation. And then finally, the last principle is continual improvement, which, as you know, if you've been a regular listener to the ISO show, continual improvement is underpinned within all of the ISO standards that we've been talking about on the ISO show over the last couple of years. So this is all about an organisation working towards improving sustainability practices and outcomes, and encouraging organisations in its supply chain to do exactly the same thing. So hopefully, by taking on board this guidance, you can have that ripple effect throughout your supply chain and encourage others to do the same thing as well. Because, as we know, this climate emergency that we're facing right now isn't going away. We need to act responsibly. We need to do something right now. But it's not just about environmental issues, is it? It's also about the wider picture in terms of the societal impact that we have, the ethical impact, and also the impact on our economy as well. So I hope this podcast has been able to provide you with a bit of a flavour of what sustainable procurement is, and also some of the elements that are included within the guidance document. As I mentioned earlier, we have got a course on sustainable procurement on 2400 over in the isologyhub.com. So if you'd like to find out a bit more about that, to get access to it and also to get our checklist, you can join as a member. You don't need to sign up for a whole year. It could just be a month. It's a really cost-effective way of being able to raise awareness of standards and also to be able to share experiences. And we've obviously got a wealth of experience of implementing different ISO standards, and we want to share that with as many as people as possible to share the ISO love. So that's all from me for now. I hope that's been useful, and I hope it's going to inspire you to really look at your procurement within your organisation and seeing whether it could have a more positive impact on our planet and also on your organisation. Thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.